Hi there, Sandra here, and welcome to a new gouache brand review. For today's video, I finally bought Himi Miya gouache that kind of went viral, I think 1 or even 2 years ago. So yep, I'm definitely not up to date when it comes to follow trends. But anyway, so today I will share with you my personal experience and perspective of this palette and talk about its quality. If you are new here on my channel, gouache is my favorite medium that I've been using for several years, and I've tried several gouache brands so far. And after trying Himi Miya gouache, I have mixed feeling about this palette and its quality. So in this video I will tell you my personal opinion and perspective of what I like and don't like about this palette, and everything you should know before buying this palette, because to me it's more suitable to certain people than others. So I will go through everything you need to know in this video. I will have the timestamps of the different things I will cover today about Himi Miya gouache, as I'm sure many of you already have this palette, so you may want to skip some parts, but I do recommend to watch the whole thing, as everything I will share is all connected. So let's get started. As always, I like to start my reviews by giving you some basic informations regarding the brand and the palette itself. I believe Himi Miya gouache is a Chinese brand, but we can't really find many informations regarding the brand. I don't think there is an official website, but we can find some informations regarding this palette in the description over the official listing by Himi on Amazon.com, which I will leave the link in the description so you can check it out. So I think it's fair to assume that this is a student grade gouache, meaning that it's not guaranteed to be light fast, and colors might fade with time, as we can't find any information regarding the light fastness. Even though the pigment information is provided, which they mainly determine the light fastness of colors, personally I wouldn't trust too much the longevity of this paint if light fastness is something important to you. So this is something to keep in mind about this paint. I bought the palette with 18 colors, and this palette contains 2 whites, titanium white and just white. That one seems to be cold and the other warm, but there isn't a very noticeable difference. But I definitely appreciate that they provide 2 whites, because with gouache you tend to use a lot of white. You can get an even bigger palette with 24 colors or even more, but to me the 18 color set is more than enough, as the color selection provided allows you to create almost any colors and any color temperature you will need for your works. It also comes with a mixing surface on the back of the lid to mix your colors, and of course, unique and appealing thing about this gouache is that it comes in jelly cups, and each cup contains 30 milliliters of paint. That I'm not gonna lie, I kind of wondered at first, is this really gouache? But now that I tried, yes, I can confirm it is gouache, as it's opaque, it dries with a matte finish, and the paint can be reactivated with water once dry. For me, the sealing lids of the cup came out quite smoothly and were very easy to remove, and even satisfying if I were to say so myself. When I first opened these jelly cups, I have to mention that the dark blue color, which I believe is Prussian blue, had a very acid odor to it that wasn't very pleasant, but it went away after some time and after it got some air. But also when I opened this palette few days after, there was some smell to it. Not terrible, and it's the smell of paint, which doesn't bothers me, but it can to some people. From the videos I watched on YouTube of this palette, no one mentioned the smell, so maybe it was just my palette, but I wanted to mention that my palette is not odorless. At the first glance after removing the sealing lids from these cups, I noticed that the colors had a sort of liquid sitting on top of the paint, which I assume it was the gum arabic. So when you open this palette, I would recommend to stir the paint before using it to mix everything well together, because when I did my first swatches without stirring the paint, they didn't look the best. Regarding the consistency, in some way it does feel like jelly, and I find that it has a very thick and dense consistency that feels almost too heavy to work with as it is if you don't add any water to it. And I'm not sure how much of a fan I am of this consistency. I'm used to work with a more creamy and lightweight consistency gouache, which I prefer, but because of this thick consistency, this paint really has a great covering power. Probably the higher coverage among all the gouache brands I've tried so far. Some colors are more transparent than others, but that's just normal, which is great if you like to use gouache thick, that it will allow you to overlay layers easily and work both from dark to light and light to dark with a good coverage, but it performs nicely when used thin and more transparent as well. So this paint will give you a good understanding and learning experience on how gouache works to get more familiar with it. And to be honest, the quality of this paint is not bad at all. It's not the professional artist quality, but I was surprised to see how well it performs, considering that it's a very affordable palette overall, so I would have expected a cheap quality for its price. The colors are vibrant, and its strength definitely lies in its covering power. So now that I tried, I understand why a lot of people love this Himi Miya gouache. Well, at least this is what I can tell you regarding the quality as far as this paint is still moist and it's in original consistency, because I can't tell yet how the consistency and the quality will hold over time once this paint will dry out. This palette doesn't seem to be completely airtight when I close it, so air will filtrate through the palette that will cause the paint to dry and crack at some point. Considering the quite big amount of paint in these cups, they will keep their moist longer than usual, but they will dry eventually, especially once you start using these colors more, and the amount will reduce unless you keep the paint moist. That can be done in different ways, which I will share some tips in a second, because it is possible to go back to its original consistency. Right now you can find many videos on YouTube to see how this paint holds up after a few months and how to get back to its original consistency. So it appears that they are still usable after all, but I can't confirm this myself yet if the quality will stay the same long term, as usually when you add water to reactivate gouache, it might lose its initial thick consistency. So this was and still is one of my main concerns for this paint. I'm not really sure how the quality of this paint is gonna hold up over a long period of time. However, there are some tricks that you can use to keep this paint moist for a longer time that I've seen people sharing in the comments over my videos and over Himi Miya gouache videos on YouTube, which I also tried some of this method, and I made a couple of videos on my channel regarding this matter, which I will leave the links to them in the description. So when the paint has dried, most people just add or spray some water on top of the paint, let the water sit for some time, and then mix the paint. But it's recommended to use distilled water because tap water might cause mold to grow on the paint that can cause smell as well, which I personally experienced, so I can testify the mold is true with tap water, but I haven't tried the distilled water, so I can't confirm yet if it makes a difference. Another thing you can do when the paint is still fresh is to add a few drops of glycerin or honey to keep the paint moist for a longer time. I've never used glycerin, which to be honest I have no idea where to buy it, but it seems to work for other people. I've tried honey before. It's not a permanent solution, but it works and it prevents the paint from cracking quite well. But I remember not liking too much the consistency afterward. But the most important thing to do is to keep your palette airtight as much as possible to prevent gouache from drying and cracking. I've seen in the comments over other Himi Miya gouache videos that has a tip. You can use a Ziploc bag or something similar to seal your palette airtight, which I'm going to use this tip and see how long the paint will stay moist and see if it's gonna help. But you see, the secure thing about gouache in tubes is that if you take care of them, the paint won't dry inside the tube and the paint will last you for years. But here with this palette and with jelly cups, you have to make some efforts in order to keep the paint moist as long as you can. So when you invest your money in gouache tubes, you can be assured that the paint and the quality will last you for years, if not forever. But here, investing money in a palette where you can't be assured how the paint is gonna hold up in a long term, it's something to take into consideration if it's going to be worth for you. Among the other reasons of what I like and don't like about this palette, but in the specific I will talk about ready palette like this one that I have yet to share. About a year ago, I remember this palette was listed for about $18, but I believe the price has increased as at the time I'm filming this video, this palette of 18 colors seems to cost about $24 on the official listing by Himi on Amazon.com without considering the shipping cost though. Personally for this palette I paid about $27 including shipping, but I bought it on AliExpress, which I think it's a reasonable price, as when I wanted to buy this palette over Amazon a year ago, I had several problems with shipping, with either not available to ship to my country, and I always have this problem with sellers on Amazon and eBay as well. That's why I don't usually buy things on Amazon, or the shipping was overpriced that the total amount would have reached like $50. To be honest, I wasn't willing to pay over $50 for something I may have not liked and used at the end, because when I first saw this palette, I already knew I wouldn't have liked it too much, no matter if the quality was good. And that's because I'm not a fan of ready paint palette to use to begin with. I prefer working with fresh paint, which I will explain it better in details later. So I was hesitant to get this palette, even though I wanted to try it out, at least to make a review video. From one side because I like to experience different gouache quality and gain a better knowledge about my favorite medium, but I also like making gouache review videos, especially to give a better idea of the quality and help the viewer making their decision if to buy certain gouache brands or not. Luckily, in the comments in one of my videos a few months ago, I was talking about that I was struggling to find a place where to buy Himi Miya gouache, and someone told me that they bought it on AliExpress, which I never thought to check it out as I rarely buy from this platform, but luckily they do ship to my country. So finally, here it is. Now that I finally tried this paint, I have a better understanding of its quality, so now I can express my personal opinion regarding if it's worth the price. But this will be only under the circumstances that this palette and its quality is going to last over time. Because paying $20 or $50 for something that won't last long term, there is quite a price difference. But in the case the quality is gonna hold up well over time, usually for gouache on average price, you can pay between $2 and $6 per tube, depending on the quality and on the brand, but you usually get only 15 or 20 milliliters of paint. So even if you pay, let's say $40 for this palette, if you consider that the price per jelly cup is about $2, if not less, it's still a great deal and very affordable considering that it does have a decent quality to work with. Because usually for gouache tubes that cost only $2, they probably won't be good quality paint to work with. But still, even if it's very affordable and the quality is not bad, if it will hold up over time, I wouldn't recommend this palette to everyone because in my opinion it depends on the type of art you make and how often you paint with gouache. Let's say if you paint every day or regularly with gouache and you use a lot of paint quickly on a regular basis, for example for painting large paintings or because you are still learning, like students for example, I think this palette can be worth it for the amount of paint you get. And one of the appealing points of this palette is that the paint comes in cups instead of tubes, which makes them easier to access and everything is ready to use quite right away. That you could even bring this palette along with you for outdoor paintings. Although this palette is very heavy, so I'm not sure how much this palette is suitable for outdoor paintings. But if you already prefer to work with this kind of setup, with paint palette ready to use, with the colors already laid out, you will probably love this palette. So in my opinion, this palette is very suitable for this kind of uses and for this kind of artist. But if you paint, let's say, just once at month with gouache, then I wouldn't be so sure this palette is gonna be worth for you, as the paint is gonna dry over time eventually, unless you make an effort to keep it moist as mentioned before. And if light fastness has an important role to you, I wouldn't recommend this palette either, but it can definitely be used for quick and practice painting, even by professional artists, and for other types of art for reproduction where light fastness doesn't have an important role. However, if you are like me that prefers working with fresh paint, then maybe you can relate to me and this palette might not be for you. And you know, just because it's popular and everyone uses it and you might feel left out if you don't have it, it doesn't mean that you have to follow the trend because it might not work for you, which is totally fine. In my case, this palette is almost a waste because I don't paint every day. It takes me a lot of time to create my composition for my illustration, and I'm not the type of artist that paint every day, and I don't often do quick painting practices. I can easily go for an entire month without painting with gouache if I have other works to do. I also prefer working with fresh paint because personally I can't stand the messiness that this kind of paint palette creates, where your colors can easily get dirty if you are not careful and if you don't use a clean brush every time you pick up a different color. It's just something that really bothers me to see my colors get dirty, as it's going to influence negatively my color mixing for my works as well. So this setup and this kind of workflow, if I can put it in this way, isn't really for me. By squeezing the paint out of the tube, I can control the amount of paint I'm going to use at time, and I don't need to clean my brush that often as I would have to do it if I were to pick up a color from a paint palette. And by that I mean I would have to clean my brush for each color exchange if I don't want my colors to get dirty, which also means losing some paint along the cleaning process. So I hope you get what I mean. And also with this palette, it's very tempting to just immerse your brush into the paint, or at least for me, I was getting a lot of paint on my brush when I was picking up a color because I'm not used to work with paint palette. so I had to be careful to not pick up too much paint that I would have needed in order to not waste paint. So if you can relate to me and you are the same type of artist as I am, I would consider the pros and cons before getting this palette because it might not be suitable for you. Even though I'm not a fan of ready paint palette, I enjoyed quite a lot this palette and its quality that I can see myself using more in the future as it worked nicely for me and for the way I work with gouache. So I'm still going to use it and I will find a way to work around the things I don't like about this palette. As you have seen by now during this painting, I put the colors I needed at time on my mixing surface and I worked as I usually do with fresh paint. So the only difference from my usual workflow when painting was cleaning my brush for each color exchange, which I'm not gonna lie that from one side it was nice to have all the colors laid out and ready to use, but I still prefer working with fresh paint overall. So I will probably use this palette for the time being for all my coming videos so I don't waste this paint. And luckily it's a quality I'm gonna enjoy, for now at least, until the paint is still moist. And I might have few ideas and paintings to do that requires a lot of paint, so I will see. So yeah, I think that's all for today. I hope you found this video helpful. I think this video turned out to be quite long, but I shared a lot of things today and I hope it was easy to follow along. Let me know in the comments if you are like me that prefer working with fresh paint over using paint palette, and let me know if you have this palette, for how long and how the quality is holding up for you. Your experience will be helpful not only to me but also to anyone watching this video interested in this palette. If you are new here, on my channel I share a lot of content about gouache and I have another gouache brand review coming up next after this one, so look forward to that. If you enjoy watching my videos and if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe and turn the notification on so you won't miss out on my next videos. So yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!